Hello and welcome to this, the second program in the series Barbados' Sea Portal. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I'm grateful that you have opted to spend the next 30 minutes with me. In our last program, we introduced you to the state of Barbados' sea portal in the period between 1628 and 1952. We looked at some of the economic activities that occurred around the Carinage and in the Carlisle Bay. We also introduced you to what became a critical element in the mix of the construction of the Deepwater Harbor, the work of the lightermen and the possibility of those men losing their jobs. Of course, that was a very topical issue in the 1961 general election. In this week's program, we shall backtrack and start our journey by looking at other commercial activities that occurred around the Carinage area. On a sunny Sunday morning in May 2005, Barbadians assemble here around the Carinage and watch as the celebrated Chamberlain Bridge was dismantled and removed from this location where it stood since 1872, playing a fundamental role in commerce and trade as it facilitated safe passage of many of the inter-island schooners.
It's a rainy and wet day in Bridgetown, and I tell you, it's quite something to be standing here under a dripping bridge watching a boat go by. But it's a historic bridge in Barbados, and it's something that a lot of people should see sometime, see the bridge being swung and a boat of this size going through it. Earlier we watched the bow of the ship go through. Now we can see the stern, which means the operation, the simple passing through of the bridge by the Michelle has been completed. It's going to be in the lower Carinage, I'm told, until it sails from Barbados. It is now 21 minutes past 8. When we came this morning, Bridgetown was a deserted city. Now the traffic has resumed its normal flow and the city is busy, a hub of activity. And we see the Chamberlain Bridge being put back into position in preparation for traffic to once more pass freely across it.
The swing bridge, that worked. So what you would find is that you have inter-island vessels, most of the Deerwood and the William Johnson, but a lot of them would have been interregional trading vessels. They were the ones that were bringing produce from out of Guyana, Trinidad, all the way up Dominica, and some will go as far as Jamaica. No. Also in the Carinage you will find the shrimp fishing fleet, and they will go to South America and bring the shrimp back and will be processed here and shipped. They had a whole fleet there. In what we call the inner basin, which is now half is taken up by Independence Square. Right, they took half of that after the Deepwater Harbor. They took half of that and made it into the Independence Square car park. Schooners were careened there and cleaned and repaired. So we had a bustling trade in that type of work. And that entire area saw so much shipping, passenger shipping, royalty landing.
Exactly 11 a.m., Her Royal Highness was received in Barbados amidst a fanfare of trumpets.
If you go further down, you went down to the screw dock and the foundry. We had the Barbados Foundry and Central Foundry. But one of these foundries was located where the Treasury building is now.
The Barbados Foundry was situated here on this spot, now occupied by the Treasury building, and the Central Foundry was situated on a spot next to the dry dock.
And they're the people who did the majority of ship repairs. When you came across the Atlantic and you want to fit your vehicle, first stop is Barbados, and this is where you refitted your vessel and then went down to the islands if everything ship shape. And that screw dock earned Barbados lots and lots of foreign exchange. But when the foundry went, obviously that would go. The Coast Guard kept it going for a while. And their vessel Trident had major repairs done on that dock. Had an unfortunate accident, and major repairs were done on the dock there. I remember my favorite yacht, which was one of the forerunners to Jolly Roger and those coastal, right? And if you go further out, the Harbour Police Station, which is opposite the London Bourne Towers, was the Harbour Police Station, which I looked through some documents some years ago and saw that it was called the Lock Hospital. I knew it from the Harbour Police Station. There's policemen you don't ever forget, like Guy Payne and those other guys. And we always look forward as boys to see them rowing coming into the Careenage on Sunday evenings. And then they've got the launches, they got the Hawk, and Hawk 2 and Snipe, and those boats like that. So most of the boys who went to the cathedral, we left them went down there. I watched all the activity in that area.
Well, they're standing in admiration of the workmanship that was displayed in and around the Careenage, had a very positive influence on their lives and, in a sense, helped to shape their careers.
It caused some of us to go be merchant seamen because of the influence and the sailing. And a lot of us learned to respect the sea. Fishing boats came in there as well. And fish was sold on the lower end of the wharf. We had Carlisle House in that area. Fish sold there for a while. The NPT there, you had what they called the wharf boys, who would go out with these lighters. They couldn't go on the lighter, but they'll hold on, or they'll put their feet against the bow and be pushed until the harbour police came around. Then they will evasive action. But these boys will go there and they'll dive for coins or whatever else and come back in. Lot of skill. I often wish that I could have dived like those boys or be allowed to jump in the wharf and do like those boys. You know, that was a no-no. All along that road, you'd have found all the cranes offloading lumber, firewood out of Guyana, Walber poles, then from the extra-regional countries, there'd be flour from Canada. As a matter of fact, if you heard somebody tell the next person, you sleep on the Canadian mattress on the Honduras bested, you know what they say?
I can imagine.
That you're sleeping on flour bags on the floor, right? The flour bags came with, they came out of Canada with the flour, and the lumber came out of the Guyanas and Honduras and those places. So, when I think back of those days, lots of fun.
Fun-filled times enjoyed by many who witnessed the activities and engaged in conversation surrounding the war. Now, while all of this is occurring, the policymakers are very concerned about this present state of the island's sea portal. We are still in the year 1952. The month is May. The legislature is in session.
My fellow assemblymen, as Barbados is the most windward island, if facilities were made for coaling and provisioning, a large and almost entirely new trade could be developed. Furthermore, I think it would be decidedly better to construct a breakwater with blocks of concrete, grooved and tongued for the outer wall, and return some distance at the end of the internal wall, instead of attempting to make a mammoth structure by depositing plastic concrete in the silt on the seabed.
The debate and discussion is continuing in the legislature. Next, Brady suggested that
the government should make as much use as possible of Carlisle Bay by giving more quayage. This could be done by deepening existing quays to a depth of 27 feet at low water and providing a breakwater which could not only efficiently protect the existing work, but still afford valuable facilities for coaling and provisioning of the largest mercantile vessels operating.
However, nowhere in Brady's proposition was mention made of shipping sugar in bulk. Such an operation was unheard of in the 19th century. It must be noted here that 32 years before government discussed the Brady's plan, a deepwater harbor report was submitted by Mr. John Coode. The Coode report favored the construction of a deepwater harbor in Carlisle Bay. However, no thought was given to a harbor at Pelican Island. With the Coode report filed safely away, the assemblymen continue to listen to Brady's presentation.
The distance from the end of the breakwater to the 6-fathom line should be 275 feet, a little more than half the length of one of the Atlantic vessels of the day. We should construct a breakwater using concrete block. This will be the only part of the work that will present any special difficulties. Blocks are to be placed by a mammoth crane or titan. Sloping blocks for the outer section of the breakwater, weighing about 30 tons, are to be placed into the coral for the foundation. Wave breakers should be deposited outside the wall, weighing say 22 and a half tons each. The foundation for the blocks of the outer wall to be leveled and prepared by divers. There is to be reclamation of the land between the pierhead and the gasworks at the back of Bay Street, with the dredged material used to create a 50-foot wide road, about 100 feet from the sea, and an entrance to the harbor, 500 feet wide and 27 feet deep. The carriage available would be 5,825 feet, and the breakwater, 2,850 feet.
Bear in mind that at that time, the government was spending large sums of money on repairs to the wharf wall, and Brady explained that
if my plans were instituted, the expenditure for such repairs would not be necessary.
Another suggestion by Brady, to which the members of the Assembly objected, was that for reclaiming the swamp, now known as the Constitution River.
If we are to be successful with this project, the Constitution River should be filled in right down to the mouth of the Carinage.
Now, after cold water was thrown on Brady's plans, numerous other suggestions were made for and many other committees formed. But it was not until the 20th century, after newspaper editorials from the Chamber of Commerce and statements by the Harbor Authority, that the government actively sought to construct a harbor. Between 1951 and 1952, just over 12 editorials appeared in the Barbados Advocate newspaper, urging that the government provide the island with a deepwater harbor. Some might recall that scene in Carlisle Bay, July 1951, when many Barbadians, including policymakers, looked on in disbelief as the bay was filled with a high number of ships. Compounding that situation was a shortage of lighters to handle the ship's cargo. And on Monday, July 30th, 1951, the Evening Advocate News carried the following editorial. Many of the good things which have come to Barbados have been the results of force of circumstances, and it is not unlikely that the conditions in the harbor last week might eventually lead to the establishment of a deepwater harbor. Every available lighter was in use last week, and inter-island schooners were pressed into service carrying cargo to and from ships. Today's advocate will press equally relentlessly for an efficiently operated harbor that will give, not take. 2 years later, at the request of the government, Sir Douglas Ritchie, then Vice Chairman of the Port of London Authority, carried out a survey and submitted his report, which he signed April 25, 1949.
In 1949, Sir Douglas Ritchie, another British engineer, came up with the astounding proposition of incorporating Pelican Island and absorbing it into Barbados. And from Pelican Island, where the water was deep, started to go to your 32 feet, to make the water to the Caribbean side, going into the Caribbean side of Pelican Island, going to the west, make that your anchorage. Now, that proposal was revolutionary. But Sir Grantley Adams, or Grantley Adams he was then, he tended to endorse it. He endorsed it in principle.
Cood's original Carlisle Bay scheme soon found itself competing against the North scheme, which included the taking of the Pelican Island. Eventually, it was decided in favor of the North scheme.
This seaside exercise now meant filling in the distance between Barbados and its island, its little offshoot of Pelican Island.
Harbour engineer Mr. H.W. Lawson visited the island in 1947. He made a survey and examined the possibility and cost of constructing a deep water harbour for Bridgetown.
And then in the early 1950s, when Sir Laurie Pyle represented him as a new Commonwealth Sugar Agreement, in which Britain gave opportunities and dispensation, a free window, a soft window for Barbadians and others to produce sugar and export it to Britain. Right. The way was now open for Barbados and other Caribbean territories to improve their production and export of sugar. Now, a number of sister islands to Barbados took the plunge. Jamaica, with its 7-mile harbor, dredged the Kingston Harbor and made bunkering facilities available. St. Lucia, with its beautiful harbor, of which Castries is a part, did the same thing. So too did St. Kitts with Bastille, all right, capital, also Antigua, St. John's, natural harbors, right, and of course, our sister and nemesis to the south, Trinidad. The Port of Spain harbor, a natural harbor, was expanding.
Then came the year 1951 and the introduction by Tate and Lyle of new ships for shipping sugar in bulk from the West Indies to Britain, Trinidad, Antigua, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, and Jamaica all received allocations, but not Barbados.
And that left Barbados out. And what happened in the early 1950s is that the sugar producing giant, Tate and Lyle, the British firm, Tate and Lyle now started a new process of taking sugar, the sugar, molasses, and rum from these Caribbean territories and loading it into their ships. Tate and Lyle introduced a new system and a new compartmentalization of their transport ships by having an open hold into which, like a container, the earliest form of container, sugar could be poured, like how you take a tot of water and pour it into a basin, all right? And that is how sugar was now being bulked and sent on to Britain, not in bags as before. Barbados continued to load the sugar in bags and down to 1961. So Barbados was now behind. Barbados was regressing, the others were progressing.
Sir Douglas said then that discharging a ton of cargo in Barbados cost a lot more than doing the same in Trinidad and British Guyana. A few months later, an Advocate editorial criticized Barbados's expensive cargo handling in Carlisle Bay and referred to a captain who said the cost of his shipping company for each day spent in Carlisle Bay was £1,200.
And this irritated our people for some time. Although, what happened is that there were other countervailing factors. By this I mean that the amount, the productivity of Barbados in terms of sugar, molasses, rum, weighed against the fact that you could not just roll those onto a ship and send them off to England.
And this was particularly significant for the island if it was to keep a pace
with other sugar-producing countries on the one hand. So the Deepwater Harbor was very crucial for the main industry. And then you had a situation where this mono-agricultural economy was being looked at as being too fragile and so on. And tourism was coming in. And during that time, we had in Parliament and so on, acts of Parliament that was beginning to look at pioneer industries and tourism that came. The 50s was a very interesting decade actually, and the 60s too. And so they actually came about, which was saying that if you want the tourists, the boats and so on to come to the island, then you would not want them stepping off and falling into the sea and all that sort of thing. And for that matter too, the importance of the port, not just for the sugar, but for the fledgling industry.
Now, the move towards the Deepwater Harbor was not only important for shipping in bulk, but for the tourist industry as well. Now, as it relates to the act to which the Senator spoke, it was on Friday, September the 5th, 1958, that Governor R.D.H. Arundel assented and an act to provide for the establishment of a tourist board charged with the duty of developing the tourist industry on the island, and for matters connected therewith was proclaimed. It was cited as the Tourist Board Act, 1958. In January 1954, the government appointed a local committee under the chairmanship of Mr. F.L. Walcott, now national hero, the Right Excellent Sir Frank Walcott. He was a then member of the executive committee. His task was to report on the actions to be taken to establish a deep-water harbor, having regards to 1. The fact that it is considered essential that the undertaking be self-supporting, 2. Savings on present cost, 3. The levy of a basic port charge not exceeding 2% on all imports and exports, 4. The special arrangements which will have to be made to finance the scheme. The Walcott Committee recommended that a deep-water harbor should be built. This recommendation met with the government's approval. In the latter part of 1954, meetings were held in London between the senior members of government and representatives of the Colonial Office, and there the problem of financing the scheme was discussed. In 1955, Sir Eric Milbourne headed a small committee which was invited to Barbados by the government to examine the possibility of the two proposed schemes, Carlisle Bay and the North Scheme, and to make recommendations. Meanwhile, ships became larger, and for reasons similar to those given by Sir John Coode in 1883 against the development of the careenage, it was decided to venture in a northerly direction and consider what was known as the North Scheme, Pelican Island, instead of Sir John's Carlisle Bay scheme. If the Sir John's Carlisle Bay scheme were accepted, the appearance of this place would have been very different from what we know it as today. This might have been the picture of Bay Street and Carlisle Bay. As fate would have it, that was not to be. Well, backtrack now to the year 1957. The government led by Premier Grantley Adams, now national hero, the Right Excellent Sir Grantley Adams, made a firm decision to go ahead with the latest plan. The contract was awarded in October of that same year to the construction engineering firm of Richard Costy Limited, with Coode and partners as consultant engineers to the government.
Grantley Adams noted that the Brady report and now Sir Douglas Ritchie's report took his attention, and when he fought and won the general election of 1956, in which he faced and defeated and humiliated Errol Barrow and his new Democratic Labour Party, Grantley Adams saw himself as having a mandate to proceed to a new port and to whatever engineering phenomenon it required. And clearly, the engineering exercise would be the greatest that Barbados had ever seen.
Vision, intellect and fortitude of our then Premier, now National Hero, the Right Excellent Sir Grantley Herbert Adams.
Well, that brings us to the end of this, the second program in the series, The Barbados' Sea Portal. As always, I appreciated the fact that you have opted to spend your time with us. Do join us next week at the same time as we continue our journey towards the construction of a deepwater harbor on this Barbados' Sea Portal. I'm Sherwood McCaskey.